All right, test that one more time, Dr. Malone.
Nope. Nope.
Okay. Seems like every time I click a button that I need to control, it takes it away from you. So let me just take you back off and we'll go there and then I won't touch it again, I promise. I'll give it a moment to, there we go. Okay. Well, welcome everybody to the Leading Impactful Meetings, Increasing Engagement and Participation with Dr. Patty Malone. She is a leading authority in communication and holds a PhD in organizational communication. She's a professor at Cal State Fullerton and UCI, University of California, Irvine. She has more than 25 years of experience in the field of communication in the following areas: corporate trainer for Dale Carnegie, speaker, author, professor, TV news anchor, and she currently owns her own business, Clear Communication Institute, Incorporated. She helps companies increase productivity and profitability through communicating clearly. She specifically focuses on dysfunctional communication in organizations and has spent many years conducting research into costly communication mistakes in companies, including backstabbing and envy in the workplace, conflict, and the importance of clear communication. She is currently working on 2 books based on her research: Communication is Money, The Guide to Workplace Communication That Impacts Your Bottom Line, and Backstabbing and Envy in the Workplace, Taming the Toxic Environment. Today, Dr. Malone will focus on transforming your meetings and help you lead more impactful meetings through increasing engagement and participation. So Dr. Malone, take it away.
Thank you, and I'm so glad you're all here with me today. And I want to mention right off the bat before we get started, please hang in here until the end because I've got some very special complimentary offers for you today. So please stay on the line. How many of you have spent your time in a meeting thinking this is a complete waste of time? Probably all of us. It's a very common experience. And here's why. There's more than 25 million meetings a day across the country, and executives spend more than 50% of their time in those meetings. 71% of those executives say those meetings are not productive. So today's objectives are to conduct impactful meetings, increase engagement and participation during meetings, and a bonus that I've added in is how to use email effectively in the workplace. So the purpose of meetings is really to create synergy, which basically means that the end result of the team is far better than the potential of each individual member. And the meetings want to tap into that to produce the best results possible. Also, it's good for making better decisions and generating better solutions as well. Now, some questions that we really need to ask ourselves before we even conduct a meeting that are really important. Does everyone who is there actually need to be there? How many times have you been in a meeting and thought, what am I doing here? This has got absolutely nothing to do with me, my job, my responsibility, or my other team members. Again, I'm sure that's happened to all of us. I know I've been in that situation many times. Also, could the meeting be replaced with a phone call, an email, or a memo? Now, actually, 25% of all those executives that are constantly attending those meetings say that yes, they can be. And actually, I've worked at a company where they switched over to this. It was a really good thing. They really considered what's on the agenda, how important is it, and can we actually deal with this over email as opposed to getting everybody together and disrupting our workday for an hour or two. And they actually stopped holding meetings unless they were actually necessary. Is too much time spent in meetings and interfering with completing the tasks? And that's the problem, because a lot of people are sitting there kind of going unconscious because they're thinking about, oh, what I should really be doing is this, this, and this. Not sitting in here listening to this stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with me or what I need to be doing. In fact, there was a company I trained about a year ago that was wasting a lot of time and a lot of money because they had so many meetings. They started every day with a meeting in the morning, and then a lot of the managers had to go to other meetings throughout the day. So we re-streamlined that. So we came up with some processes to lessen the number of meetings and to make sure that the people who were there actually needed to be there. Now, meetings basically focus on the actual task processes, which is the purpose of the meeting, to get a particular job done, to accomplish a particular purpose. as well as building relationships, the transactional processes that go along with conducting the meetings. How are we communicating with each other during the meetings? And that actually has a major impact on getting the tasks accomplished. So let's think about this for a minute. What are some of the best and worst meeting practices? Now, think about some meetings that you've been in the past. Think about some that have gone really well. What was going on that was improving those meetings, that was helping things run smoothly? What were people doing? What were people not doing that made for the best meetings and the best processes? Also, what about the worst meetings? What were people doing in the worst meetings that made it just unbearable, like a really bad experience? Now, actually, if you happen to have a piece of paper handy, and if you don't worry about it. But if you do, it would be great if you could draw a line down the center, and on the left, write best, and on the right side, write worst. And as we go through this webinar, whatever ideas come to mind, just write something down on the left or right. This is a best meeting practice. This is something that works really well. Over on the right side, this is the worst meeting practice. This is something that's really interfered with a meeting going well. So as we're thinking about the best and the worst, I want to begin by thinking about the best. And I would like to ask you a question. I would like to know some things that you've experienced in the past that have made for really good meetings. Don't worry about the worst meetings yet. We're going to get to that in a few minutes, a little bit further down the road. But for right now, I would love to hear from you. What are some of the best meeting practices that you've seen? Things that have really helped the meeting move forward. So go on ahead, and if you've got any ideas, it could be really short or it could be longer, whatever you want, go ahead and let Lisa know by raising your hand.
Okay.
So, Lisa, do we have anything there?
Yeah. Laura says positive directives.
Great.
And Paul says developed agenda, keeping on time.
Absolutely.
All right. And we've got, let's see, Ven, let me go try to get your hand. Al says collaboration, sharing, and updating document as a team. Let's see. I'm trying to get the hands raised and it's not. Let's see if I can get it. Hold on. Sorry, you guys. I will see. Okay. Ven. I don't know why it's not clicking for me. Apologize about that. Okay, well, so the last one was collaboration, sharing and updating documents as a team. I apologize for those of you who raised hands. It didn't let me click you over.
That's okay. Just hold those thoughts and we'll see. We may get a chance to come back to them. Okay, so we're going to begin with some of the best meeting practices. Oh, and all of a sudden, I've lost control.
Okay, no worries. That's an easy one for us to fix. Figured that one out. Okay, try again.
Nope, not doing it.
Yep, there it is.
There we go. Okay, so best meetings have a clear purpose and they're outcome driven. So there's a purpose to a meeting. It's not just to be held simply because, oh, we always have a meeting at this time. We do it every Friday afternoon at this time or once a month at this time. It actually needs to have a purpose and it's outcome driven. So what is the results? What is the goal? What are we trying to accomplish in this meeting? So if we can focus on those two things, that will head us a long way in the right direction towards having the outcomes that we want. Also, as somebody else mentioned, we need to have a very clear agenda. That helps us keep focused on the task ahead of us and also helps us to stay on time. It's also really important to set priorities because in order to make sure that we do end on time, we're probably not going to have time to get through every single item that we've got. So we want to put those items in order of priority, and in case we don't get to all of them, then a couple of them may get bumped to the next time that we have a meeting. And it's really good if we can set that agenda ahead of time and distribute it before the meeting, not as people are walking in the door, but like hours earlier, or if possible, even like the day before, to give people a good chance to really look over the items, consider them, just think about if they have any input on any of those particular items that are on the agenda. Very important during the meeting to use good interpersonal communication skills. We want to make sure that we're addressing the actual issues, the problems, or anything else that's going on, not personalities. Unfortunately, a lot of times in meetings, it can descend into conflict because people aren't really using the best interpersonal communication skills. Also, they may not stay focused on the issues. There may be some personality clashes or individual problems between people. And when the focus starts to shift on that, then things start spiraling downhill very quickly. Also, we want to watch our nonverbals. What do our faces look like? Do we look interested? Are we making eye contact with the people who are talking? Are we smiling? Are we nodding our head? Are we looking attentive and interested? We want to make sure we aren't doing things like not making eye contact or looking down, not paying attention to whoever's speaking, rolling our eyes, or making exasperated facial expressions or bored. We really want to be careful about that, because that can really send things in the wrong direction. Also, don't get defensive. In a meeting, somebody may make a comment to you, or they may ask you a question. Maybe we take it the wrong way, we read it the wrong way, and then we go into that defensive mode when we respond. And they may not have meant anything about it. So let's consider maybe that they didn't. They're just trying to find something out, or they're just trying to make a comment, not that they're necessarily trying to attack you. And at the same time, we want to be careful when we're making comments to other people or asking questions. What is our tone of voice? We want to make sure that we're not putting them on the defensive. Effective meetings, another thing that we can do before the meeting is set up the room in a way that's appropriate depending on what we're trying to accomplish in that particular meeting. So for example, in some cases, you might want to have a circle where everybody's facing each other, or maybe you might want to have a U-shape with whoever's speaking standing in the middle, but that way everybody can see each other. Sometimes you might even want to have small groups with tables where small groups are facing each other, sitting around a round table, but where they can also easily face towards the front if somebody's up front giving a presentation. So the room needs to actually meet what you're trying to do, what the purpose is, what you're trying to accomplish. Also, have somebody, whoever's leading the meeting perhaps, greeting people as they come in. Greet them warmly, make them feel welcome, make them feel happy to be there, not like, oh no, another meeting I've got to sit through. Begin and end in time, we've mentioned that. So we want to make sure that we do start right at the time we said, because if we wait for stragglers and people are coming in late, then pretty soon more and more people are going to be coming late because they think, well, we're not going to start until 5 or 10 after anyway, so there's no rush. So make sure you start right at the top, right exactly when you say you're going to. And then make sure that you end on time as well. And that's why it's important to prioritize the agenda items, because you need to keep that in mind, especially if you see that you're starting to run towards the end of the meeting. You know you might need to make some adjustments along the way. Then at the end of the meeting, and you can actually do this in the meeting, and this is great to help improve your meetings, get some feedback from people right there on the spot. Ask them what they liked about the meeting, what they thought was effective, what they thought worked really well, and also what didn't go so well, what could use some improvement. That way you can get some immediate feedback in the moment, on the spot, while it's very fresh in their minds. Also, develop ground rules or guidelines. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this a little bit further on in this webinar. But it's a good idea to have some good ground rules or some guidelines, and actually out of those to develop a code of conduct. And we'll explain what that is in just a bit as well. Now, if you don't have guides or a code of conduct, why is that important? Because if you don't, people are going to lose interest and they're going to start multitasking. Now, our attention span is very short in meetings. You probably have no idea what it is, but it's about 10 minutes. So if we're not re-engaged within 10 minutes, that's when we start wandering and we start multitasking. So 70% of meeting participants at some point are going to be doing multitasking. Side conversations, which can also be problematic, 72% of people will end up doing that. And 64% of people will check emails. A lot of times they've got the computer right there in front of them and they need it. They need it for the meeting, but they're going to start doing something else, or they hear a bang. It's, oh, I better go check that email real quick. And then there's 54 who will just zone out. They won't necessarily do anything else. They might even be giving nonverbal, smiling, nodding, whatever, but they're off in la la land. They're not listening anymore. They're tuned out. And about 41% of the people will eventually leave the room. Sometimes they'll leave, run to the restroom, come back, run out, get a drink of water, come back. Sometimes they won't come back. And of course, that's obviously much worse if you're doing some kind of a virtual meeting, because then you've got no idea what the other person on the other end is doing. And a lot of people will leave the room. They'll start vacuuming or doing household things around the house, especially if they've got an in-home office. So we want to increase our engagement in meetings so it doesn't end up looking like what we've got there at the bottom of the screen. The first thing to do is be aware of that 10-minute attention span. Always have that foremost in the front of our heads. We want to make the meetings very interactive, including everybody, including a lot of interaction, discussion. Break things up, especially keeping that 10-minute rule in mind. Do something else. Shift what you're doing. Re-engage people. And you could do that by doing things like brainstorming, maybe even mini activities, putting people in a small group or a couple of people in pairs, just briefly, even for just a minute or 2 minutes, to discuss the most recent point or to see what other ideas they can come up with. And then ask for individual input from the group. This is a good thing to do as well. Now, a lot of times, if people are being quiet, whoever's leading the meeting may say something like, well, what do you think about that? Or what do you think about what Joe just said? And just kind of throw out an open-ended question. That's not always as effective, because the people who are quiet tend to stay quiet, and the people who dominate and talk too much tend to take over when we do that. So it's better to actually call on people. Rose, what did you think of what Joe just said about increasing our sales? And then let them respond. Now, the purpose of this is not to embarrass somebody or to put them on the spot, but it's really to help increase their involvement, especially if they tend to be quieter. And then plus, if you've done that a few times, they know that you're likely to do that. They will probably be paying more attention because they don't want to be caught off guard. But that's also a really great way to get some good ideas that they may not volunteer, especially the more introverted people. They may have some great ideas, but it may take a little bit of pulling to get those ideas out of them. So you want to specifically ask certain individuals what they think about a specific question. And again, don't make it some just broad generic thing. Make it pretty specific. You can actually even do a round robin depending on how many people are in the meeting. If it's a smaller meeting, you can go around and hear input on a major idea or a major point from each person in the group and limit it. Maybe say, okay, 1 minute or 30 seconds, depending on the number of people. You want to really encourage that cross discussion and feedback, that interaction. So it's not just one person presenting a lot of information and everybody else is sitting there bored to tears, or occasionally somebody might say something else. It really needs to be an interactive group project. Another good thing to do is to really acknowledge people and show appreciation for their ideas, for their input. And you can actually reward people for having great ideas. And there's a number of different ways you can do this, but this is something that will really increase engagement and also encourage them to participate more. So for example, you could have a best idea of the month, the best idea of the week, a best idea in the meeting. And then there's a number of ways you could do it. You could actually nominate people and vote who had the best idea, and then give them a gift certificate, maybe for a dinner at a local restaurant. Or maybe you could have everybody put a little bit of money in the kitty, and then whoever wins gets the kitty. Or you can do a drawing. That's another thing. Maybe you've got several nominations for who had the best idea. Maybe there's 5 or 6 people, their names are thrown in there. Do a drawing, draw one out, and that person wins the kitty, or that person wins a gift certificate to a restaurant or something along those lines. But if you can start engaging people in that way, they get a whole lot more excited about really paying attention and contributing good ideas. Listen, as we know, listening, we don't listen 75% of the time. We really need to listen to other people. Meetings are a perfect time to go unconscious, right? That's a perfect time to start daydreaming and thinking about other things, especially if what they're talking about doesn't apply to us. But if we really listen to people, they sense that. They can tell when you're really listening, and that will make a big difference in the relationship and in the interaction. A great way to increase your engagement if you're drifting. If you catch yourself not really listening, you're drifting off thinking about what you want for dinner or something else, start asking questions. That will re-engage you if you're drifting away. So listen and then start asking questions, and you'll be more interested in what they have to say. Now, we also want to be aware of the dangers of misperceptions and miscommunication. It's difficult enough to communicate just one-on-one when we're just two people talking back and forth in terms of understanding words, the meanings of words, the nonverbals, interpreting them. But when you get a meeting, you often have a lot of people in there, sometimes people talking at once. It's very easy to misinterpret a facial expression or a tone of voice, read something into what they said that wasn't there. So just be careful of that and don't jump to conclusions. And that's another good reason to ask questions, just to check for clarification to make sure you really understood what they said and also what they meant. Another thing is be responsible for your own engagement and participation. So again, if you catch yourself drifting, oops, I better refocus on who's talking. I better pay more attention to what's being said instead of just sitting over here in my head daydreaming about something else. So be responsible for being engaged and participating. Offer a suggestion, offer an idea, respond to a question, or ask your own question. Praise participants, recognize their contributions, even if they don't win the best idea of the month. That's still a great way to encourage people. Praise them. That's a great idea. Let's discuss that further, or that idea's got some great merit. Let's really consider that. Maybe we can do some research on it, but give them credit where it's due. And end the meeting on a positive note. Now, this is really important because sometimes things get out of control, people get off the agenda, maybe people start arguing, there's a lot of debate, maybe there's a conflict going on, and then, oops, we're out of time, we gotta leave. And then that's the end of the meeting. So people walk out kind of in a huff, or they're upset about something, they're irritated, they're angry. That's not the way you want to end the meetings, because then they don't want to come back, and then they're irritated maybe for the rest of the day even. So make sure that you end the meeting on a high note. If it's heading in that direction and you see the time is slipping away, whoever is facilitating or leading that meeting, bring it back to something positive, and make sure that you're back in that positive mood before the meeting comes to an end. Now, I had mentioned before to ask for feedback right there on the spot, what worked well, what didn't work well. But beyond the meeting, it's also a good idea, talk to people after the meeting. You can do informal interviews, casual, just ask them what they thought, maybe later in the day, or maybe right after the meeting, just talk to a couple of people, get their instant feedback while it's fresh in their mind. Or if you want, you could even do something like develop an online survey that they could respond to, or even something anonymous where they drop it into a box, like feedback. I wouldn't call it suggestion box. For some reason, people don't seem to like those too well. But feedback on the meeting, that might be another way to approach it, and let people drop their ideas in there. That way, you're going to find out from the people who are in there what needs to be fixed, what needs to be improved, what's going really well that we could do more of. And develop the ground rules. Now, this is part of the code of conduct that we talked about a little bit earlier. So we want to think in terms of guidelines, and this is actually a great thing to do at a meeting to get everybody on board. Let's, as a group, as a team, develop the guidelines and the code of conduct that we think will work. And that way, everybody's participating in the process, and they're a lot more likely to get on board. So a good way to approach this is to actually do what I had mentioned at the very beginning. I said if you have a piece of paper there handy, draw a line down the center, and then on the left, write best meetings, and on the right, worst meetings. And then start writing down, what are the best behaviors? What are the best practices for the best meetings? And what are the worst? What are the worst practices? What are the worst behaviors that make for the worst meetings? And in the meeting, you can actually start out by having people work on that for a few minutes on their own, like individually, maybe get a list of 5 or 6 things on each side. Then you can even, depending on the time, put them in a small group and have them kind of combine what they came up with for their ideas for best meetings and worst meetings. Then get everybody together and have somebody at the front, either with a flip chart or a whiteboard, do the same thing, have that line drawn down the center, and have them shout out some of their ideas that they came up with for the best meetings and the worst meetings, and then write them down in each column until you get the board filled. So you've got a lot of ideas up there. In fact, this might be worth having a meeting just on its own, just to do this, just to work together together on the guidelines and a code of conduct for the meetings. So that's what you want to do, is to focus on the best meetings and then the worst meetings. Involve everybody in developing those guidelines together with this process that I just suggested, and they're going to be so much more involved with it and so much in line with it, rather than people rebelling against it or resisting. It's like, that's not fair, I don't like that idea, because people will be coming to agreement. And again, you want to base that on the best and worst meeting behaviors that you come up with together as to what you think is appropriate and what you think is inappropriate for meetings. And get consensus. Why do you think this is important? If you can get everybody on board, then you're not going to have much resistance. People are not going to say, what? Turn my cell phone off. I don't want to do that. I'm waiting for an important call. If you get everybody on board and everybody's in agreement and in consensus with the guidelines, you're going to have a much better result, and people are going to pay attention to it. They're going to take responsibility for it and own it. So here's some examples of what might go on the guidelines. Cell phones off during the meeting, respect other people's opinions, ask questions if you don't understand something, encourage others to participate. And actually, while we're here at this point, think about that for a second, based on some of the best ideas that we've talked about. Like I said, we haven't gotten to the worst yet, we're about to get there. But based on what we've talked about so far, what do you think might be some additional guidelines? I just threw out a few examples there, besides cell phones, respect others' opinions. So this would be something that you could respond to right now. What else do you think might be some good guidelines or some good ideas of what would be best behaviors or processes for meetings? So let's see what you've got.
All right, you can put that, there you go. Turn off instant messaging during the meeting. That's a big one.
Yes.
Absolutely. Don't talk over others. Yes. I like that one too. Very good. Anybody else have any comments on what they believe makes for good meeting practices? Be on time. That is a wonderful one. Set rules at the beginning of each meeting. Very good. Don't complain about problems. Come with solutions to problems. That's excellent, Laura.
Great.
Allow people to speak. Start and stop on time. Great participation today. Thank you so much. Looks like we've got a little pause there, Dr. Malone, but they've really put a lot of, develop a good agenda. There we go. Karen says that. Thank you, Karen. Okay.
That's a good start. So let's move into the bad behavior, what you've all been waiting for. What for the worst meetings. So for whatever reason, we seem to remember the bad things a little bit more easily than the positive ones. So what ideas come to mind, or what have you been writing down in the worst column as we've been going through this? What are some bad behaviors that you've seen in meetings? What are some of the worst behaviors that you think should really be avoided? Worst behaviors or worst processes? So let's get some feedback on this one. What do we have?
Okay, so for worst behaviors, gossiping. Yes, that's a bad one. Talking longer than 5 minutes. Oh, I like that one. Thanks, Ben. Talking over others, side conversations. Dr. Malone, that's a big one when you have large groups of people in a meeting, isn't it?
It's so distracting.
It is. Let's see. Anything else? Background noise. Interrupting the speaker. Yes.
Yeah.
Taking a phone call. You know, people are actually that rude sometimes. Putting others down. Negative comments. Absolutely. Right. Music went on hold. Emailing during the meeting, not related to the meeting. So just kind of doing your own thing. Yeah, that's a big one. Reading background materials. They have a lot of feedback for what makes bad meeting. Belittling others, joking too much. Apparently, we've all experienced some pretty bad meetings. We have a lot of feedback here. Not coming prepared to discuss what's on the agenda, or not having an agenda in advance. Those two are really important. Confrontation instead of taking it offline. That's a really good thing. Yep, makes for a bad meeting.
Yeah, those are all great, and actually a lot of those things stick in our mind because when they happen, we're irritated, and we don't forget that. They have a tendency to stand out in our minds. Okay, so let's look at some of the ones we've got up here. Some of the things that have already been mentioned. Side conversations, again, very distracting, and it's distracting in a lot of ways. It's distracting for the people who are sitting around them. It's also distracting for the person who's speaking, for the person who's at the front when they see or hear this going on in the background. Eye rolling, those kind of negative facial expressions. Somebody says something that somebody doesn't agree with and they roll their eyes, or they go, something like that. So again, we want to watch our facial expressions and our nonverbal communication. Also, non-participation. Somebody is leading the meeting, they ask for feedback, they ask for a question, they want some kind of discussion, and nobody says anything. They just sit there like deer in the headlights and say nothing in response. And unfortunately, sometimes that tends to be the same people. They're just kind of there, but they're not really contributing anything to the meeting themselves. Being late, that was also mentioned. Again, that's very distracting. It's very disruptive, and it's actually really disrespectful too. Dominating, another one that was also mentioned. The person who keeps talking and talking and talking and won't let somebody else get in a word edgewise. They kind of take over the meeting and they're just in control of things. And usually they've said what they need to say within the first minute, but they're still talking. Checking phone and emails, we just talked about that. Again, that's disrespectful and rude. And most of the time when people are checking phone and emails, again, it's got nothing to do with the actual topics or what's going on within the meeting. It might be personal or it might be work related, but just something else, not connected to what's happening at the moment. And really, is it going to kill us to not check our phone or emails for an hour during a meeting? Or when people go off on tangents, they start talking about all kinds of other things, again, unrelated, or they start going off on some rant. Something sets them off and they're upset and they go off into some tirade about something else in a different direction. And meetings that just run too long. You say it's going to end at 4:30 and it's 4:45 and you're still in there. That's annoying for people. They feel it's disrespectful. Plus they've got other work to do, not just be in this meeting. So we want to make sure that we end those meetings on time. Or no clear actions result. So no action items as the result of the meeting. No decisions reached, no actions to be taken. Well, what's the point? You know, if you haven't fulfilled the purpose and it's not outcome driven and you don't have clear and specific actions to take, that's not even worth having a meeting then. I just want to briefly mention this because we're not talking about virtual meetings today. We're talking about face-to-face, but I just wanted to briefly touch on a trend that I've seen happening lately where it's not fully face-to-face and it's not fully online. They're trying to do both at the same time. So they're in a meeting room, conference room, people face-to-face around the conference room, and then they've got a camera somewhere, and then people in other parts of the country or another location are observing this thing. That's a really bad idea. And actually, I was working with a company a couple of years ago, and they started out doing that, and we switched it. What we did was we made them separate meetings, and it worked out so much better, and there's a number of reasons why. Hybrid meetings are very difficult to conduct because the participants have different needs. There's different rules of engagement or different ways to engage people when you're face-to-face than when you're online. And it's actually completely different techniques, and you can't do both at once. So if you're engaging the people face-to-face, you're completely losing the people who are online or who are virtually attending. They're totally bored and they're doing other things. Or if you're doing things to engage the online people, it's the same thing. The people who are face-to-face are completely losing touch. You can't meet both of those needs at the same time. It's very difficult to do. People skills are extremely crucial in this type of situation, but honestly, even that is not enough. There are a number of different ways to handle that. And we did. We changed the processes and it worked extremely well. We got nothing but positive feedback from both the people who were virtual as well as the people who were face-to-face, whereas the initial time they tried to do this hybrid thing they've been doing for a long time, it just did not work. Communication is exceptionally difficult when you've got those two things going on at the same time. So here's some more meeting tips. During the meeting, it's great if you can encourage creative thinking outside of the box and be really clear going in. Again, purpose and outcome driven. Be clear what outcome you want. Don't leave the meeting with everything still just up in the air, no clear outcome. This is so important to create an atmosphere of trust. Trust is actually the glue that holds the team together. And you really want to have that trust in meetings, because if you don't, then people are afraid to volunteer ideas. They're afraid that somebody else will steal their idea, somebody else will take credit for their idea, or that somebody will make fun of their idea or roll their eyes or act like, boy, that's stupid. What are they thinking? So you need to create that atmosphere of trust where people are willing to take risks. They're willing to volunteer ideas that might be out of the box without fearing some of the other possible consequences of doing that. Now, one thing to help create trust is to eliminate blame, not to blame other people for things that didn't get done on time, or not to blame other groups or other teams, but really to just eliminate that and take responsibility. Also, in terms of trust, we want to give other people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe somebody made a mistake, maybe somebody said something in too snappy a tone of voice, or maybe they did make a strange facial expression. Let's not automatically assume that they're trying to be mean or that they're trying to be negative. Maybe they're having a bad day, maybe something else is going on. So let's start out by giving the benefit of the doubt and not just automatically rushing to that worst conclusion about them. Another thing that we can do is promote your team to others, or brag about your team. Give them kudos, give them congratulations, tell other teams what your team is doing, and do it in a positive way, not like in a competitive way, but especially with the upper level managers and talking about teams. Promote the team so that other teams know what your team is doing and that they're doing a good job. Also, as a leader, if you make a mistake, it's best to be honest and admit it. And again, not going to trying to blame circumstances or something or somebody else. People really respect you when you make a mistake and take responsibility for it and are honest about it. It makes you much more human, much more relatable, and they will definitely respect you far more if you do that. Another thing is to follow through. As a leader, you want to lead by example. So if you tell somebody you're going to do something, or you're going to get some information for them, or you're going to follow up in a certain amount of time, make sure that you actually do that. Don't leave them hanging. That also impacts trust. And ask their opinions. Not only ask their opinions, try to use their suggestions as much as possible. And all of these things not only will help make for better meetings, they will also help strengthen the team, help strengthen the relationships among the team. But the more you can use their suggestions, the more they will be part of the solution, the more they will buy into what's happening, the more they will take responsibility for it. You also, I mentioned that, lead meetings by example. And now this is something else that's really important too, to help with the communication and to develop that connection, is to build informal socializing time into the meetings, perhaps at the beginning, maybe the first 5 minutes, or at the very end. Kind of a get to know each other time. It could be very brief, just maybe some quick icebreaker or some fun thing, just to get things off on a fun, positive note and give people a chance to connect with each other a little bit better. Also develop shared accountability. So not one person is always responsible for getting everything done. Making sure that maybe people have accountability partners, or there are certain groups that are accountable for certain things, but sharing that responsibility and accountability. Also, if you can implement peer feedback system, so they can give feedback to each other in terms of how the meetings are going, how the purposes are being met, how the goals are being accomplished. And if possible, it's really helpful to help rotate the leadership and the facilitation of meetings. Again, people have more buy-in, they're more connected to it if they feel like they have a bigger leadership role in it. So if there's any way you can sometimes rotate that amongst your team members, that will again do a lot for helping them be more excited about it, more engaged, if they have a bigger role, more responsibility. And then you want to build that camaraderie. And in fact, all of the things that we've got listed up there helps that, building that camaraderie, because the more camaraderie you have among your team members, the better they're going to work together. And the teams that have the most successful meetings internalize the team and the company mission. And those two things need to be in alignment. The team needs to have a mission, and it needs to be in alignment with the company mission. Also recognizing the interdependence, not only of each individual team member, but of each team, the interdependence of each team to achieve the overall objectives and mission of the company. And again, the importance of creating that climate of trust amongst everybody. Communicate clearly and meaningfully with each other. Have a positive attitude when you go into the meetings and throughout the meetings, and leave with a positive attitude. And the most successful teams also come up with some kind of a system to deal with conflict, either to head it off or to nip it in the bud or to shift it into a different direction so it turns into constructive conflict rather than destructive conflict. And I've helped a number of different companies with that, inserting processes to help overcome conflict and to transform destructive conflict into cooperation. And the purpose of all this is to focus on building relationships and community amongst the team members and even across different teams, so people are connected with each other. All right, now we are going to go into email. Are you inundated with email at work? Companies lose $1 billion a year due to email overload. And employees spend 35% of their time on email or email-related tasks. Now, as we go into this, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I just wanted to touch a couple of main points. But before we get into it, I want you to think about this. What are your pet peeves with email? What bugs you about email in the workplace? And that's actually a question I'm asking to you right now. I would like to get some ideas about that. What are some of the things that really bug you about email in the workplace? What are your pet peeves? So Lisa, what do we have?
Yeah, okay, so we have lack of explanation, those like one-liner kind of, shotgun approach of information, copying everyone, the reply all, not enough details, partial answers. Well, people don't read, so there's like brevity is important, but you also have to give enough information to make it make sense. So that's a balancing act. When there are several questions in an email, but the person only responds to one, that's a big frustration for me, for sure. Lack of email etiquette, no hi or thank you, just kind of barging right in. It's almost like yelling.
Yeah, sometimes they put the message in the subject line. That's the email.
Yeah, talk about shortening the communication process.
Right. Yeah, actually, I wanted to mention something too about a couple of people said it. The question, when you send like a couple of questions, you get 3 or 4 and only one gets responded to, that's a real standard thing. In fact, that kind of happens face to face. If we ask several questions in a row, people will usually just respond to the last one. Well, on email, what typically happens is they will answer the one questions that is easiest or quickest, or they know right off the top of their head, and they'll just respond to that. So I learned over a period of years not to do that. And knowing that, it's a good idea. Do not send a whole bunch of questions in an email. I would pick your 1 or 2 most important questions, send that in email, wait till they respond, then send the next 1 or 2 most important questions and let them respond, because you know that they're going to do that.
Yeah, a couple more that came in. Lots of things having nothing to do with the person that they're sending the email to, not clear enough about what they want to say, lack of etiquette, no contact information, can't follow up. I'm gonna just gotta move the chat box. Sorry, we got a lot of questions there. One of the participants says they only send email if they need it for documentation, otherwise they pick up the phone.
Yeah. So we've got a ton of those, and we could probably go on because there seems to be an endless list these days of complaints about email. And actually, Oops, it looks like I might be losing control here. Let's see here.
There you go. It's coming back on. Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to give a few email tips, and actually this is a huge subject. I do separate trainings on this as well as speaking presentations because it can take a long time. But I wanted to tip on it because it's so present in people's minds today. So a few things to think about. Only use for facts, praise, or encouragement. People use email in so many incorrect and inappropriate ways. So if there's a fact, or for example, we're changing our meeting from 3 until 4, or some kind of a statistic somebody needs to have, a quick answer to a question, or if you're praising somebody, great job you did this morning taking care of that irate customer, or encouraging them, that's all great for email. No bad news. Don't send anything through an email that's going to create a negative emotional response in the recipient. And people do this all the time because they don't want to deal with somebody else's negative emotions. People have gotten fired over email. People have been told they've lost a contract over email. People have been told their vacations have been canceled over email. That is a really, really bad and chicken idea of how to handle things. If there's bad news, you've got to tell somebody face to face. And if you can't, due to geographical distance, then do it on a WebEx or on a Skype, or at the very least by phone. But do not send something like that in an email. Another thing is the no scroll rule. You want to just use a few bullet points. You want to make it short. You did, like Lisa said, you want to be thorough enough where you're answering the question or you're getting the information out there. But if you've got like some really long email that goes on and on, people aren't going to read it. I can't tell you how many times I've done this, and I'm sure you have too. You just kind of look and see this big long thing. So I don't have time to read that right now. I'll come back to it, and then you never go back to it. So try and just use bullet points and make it short enough so they don't have to scroll down through a bunch of text. And here's another thing. This is such a time saver. Only check your email at designated times. So for example, say, okay, I'm checking my email this morning between 10 and 10:15, and I'm checking it this afternoon between 3:15 and 3:30. Do not sit there all day constantly checking emails or constantly like bing, bing, and responding to each email. You waste so much time doing that. And this is a huge time saver if you actually start implementing it. Turn off those message alerts. When you're in the workplace, and especially in a situation like when you're in a meeting, you turn off the message alerts, then you won't be tempted to be constantly going over, oh, who was that? Or what is this? Is this important? Do I need to deal with this now? Turn those off when you're working. Only copy those who need the information. And that was something that was just mentioned. That happens all the time. You get these strings of long emails that's copied to everybody in the world. I get so many emails myself as a professor at one of the universities I work from. I don't read, I'd say probably 2/3 of them I never even open. It's like, I don't know who this person is. There's some lengthy email, or there's this long debate about something that has no impact on me or my job or what I do. So only copy to those who need information. However, given that, and we mentioned that a great way to use email is for congratulations or praise. If you're congratulating, that's something you do want to copy senior executives. That way they can see how your team members are doing, or your coworkers, if somebody's doing a good job. And then plus the person who's doing the good job and is getting the congratulations really appreciates seeing that you copied it to somebody higher up the level. That means that means a great deal to them. So in those situations, copy the senior executives, but not everybody in the company. Somebody else mentioned this, the names and greetings. This is so important. Now there's research on this, and that's what these statistics are. In organizations that have high morale, 78% of the people who are writing emails used names, like, hi, Ellen, okay, hi, Sam. 58% of them use the greetings, which is the hi or hello or something like that at the beginning. 73% signed off with a closing of names, best Ed, something simple like that. Those organizations with low morale, only 36% of the people used people's names, only 20% used the greetings at the beginning, and only 23% used the closing and the names at the closing. Now, before we get into questions, I'm going to open up some questions. But before we do that, I want to go ahead right now and tell you about a few free offers, some complimentary offers I've got coming up for you. And then we are going to open it up for questions. Now, first of all, I do have an audio digital link I can send directly to you if you would like to email me, because I would love to continue working with you. Our relationship doesn't have to end here today with this webinar. If you have any interest in finding out more about training or speaking or any of that, please feel free to email me. If you would like me to come in maybe and speak to your company or group or association, or if you belong to another group or association, or if you know of somebody else that you think would like to have me come in as a speaker or trainer and you would like to put me in contact with them, that would be great. So feel free to email me for any of those things. Also email me and I will send you the direct link to this audio. It's an interview with me. I think it's about 45, 50 minutes, and it covers a number of topics in communication that creates problems in the workplace and what to do about it. Things like organizational change, dealing with difficult people, conflict, a number of other topics that we didn't even touch on today. So if you would like that, just send me an email. And in addition, I have got a complimentary 30-minute increased team productivity and profitability communication strategy session for your team or your company. If you're a team leader, a manager, or a decision maker. And the reason I say that is because sometimes I have people who want to talk about their situations with their husband or their wife. That's not what I do. So this is definitely for your team at work. It's not an individual personal type of thing, but it's a 30-minute complimentary strategy, and you need to apply for it because there's a limited number of slots available, and we will actually take them in the order that they come in. So feel free to email me if you want that. info@drpattymalone.com, and I will be popping my email address up in just a second. And I wanted to tell you briefly what you will get out of that, what the takeaways are from that strategy session. First of all, you will create a sense of clarity about the ideal team communication that you really want. You'll discover the building blocks that are essential to help you get that ideal team communication. You'll also find out the number one thing that is blocking you or preventing you from having that ideal team communication right now, and identify the most powerful actions that will move you towards the ideal team communication that you really want. And you can complete the strategy session with the excitement of knowing exactly what to do next to create the ideal team communication that you really want. So I really hope to hear from you about that. I would love to work with you further. So here's all of my information. And again, this is all about creating strong teams and building teams. And one quote I wanted to give you, and then I'll open it up for questions. Players win games, teams win championships. So let's go on ahead and see what questions that you have for me.
All right, we had just a couple of things. I'll make sure that I answer those. Will this recording be sent? Yes, we will compress the recording, and you'll either get it in tomorrow's email. You'll definitely get it by Monday, but you will get the recording. What is the rule for greetings? I heard that it is unprofessional to say, "Hi, John," but instead should begin the email with John, comma.
Yeah, it really depends on what your relationship is with the person. If it's somebody you don't know, yes, it would be better to start with John, comma. If it's somebody that's a coworker that you know well, then it's perfectly fine to start with something casual like, "Hi, John."
Okay, that's good. Here's another. When my boss's boss writes an email to my boss and me for two people, will I have to write back to my boss's boss or to my boss only? Or is it the duty of my boss to answer the questions?
Well, I would send it directly to the main person that you're responding to, and I would copy the other person.
Okay. So it also, I think, has a lot to do with who the question is directed to. So if you can't tell, then maybe that's where you go and you ask your boss for clarification. Was this directed to you, or do you want me to handle it? Maybe that's a great way to do that.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's see. We've got a few more coming in. When should you use respectfully or very respectfully in an email?
You know, honestly, that's just a personal choice. Some people feel very comfortable doing that, and others feel uncomfortable. It's just not part of their personality. So it's really whatever is comfortable with you.
Yeah, my husband's in the military, and sometimes he'll forward an email to me, and at the bottom of his signature, sometimes it will say that, I think that's in a formal environment. It's probably more common
Yes.
in a formal company.
Right.
Okay, let's see. Any other questions coming in? I have a couple of points of information that came up while you were teaching us, Dr. Malone, and one was the way that my team uses email is very sparingly, because we invested in a project planning application that allows us to do more chat-based communication back and forth, so the inbox doesn't get bogged down. And boy, that's really helped a lot, because I know for a fact that it's all kept in that project thread. There's no kind of loosey-goosey emails flying around, and it's helped. And then the other thing that I find, if you're checking your email all the time, this is a really big one for me. If you check your email all the time, the people who are communicating with you or sending emails have an expectation that you're always available. So to manage expectations, when you have your set times of answering and responding, you let them know that you're actually getting work done. That's my 2 cents worth in the program. Okay, we have a couple more come in. How do you handle an email response when a question has been sent to you with lots of CCs? Perhaps there's some back and forth, and you don't feel all the CCs need to be on there. So maybe it's a more complicated conversation, or a direct conversation between you and another person, but there are a lot of people added to the communication thread.
I would respond directly to that person. I've been caught in some of those emails before where it was being copied to several people, and it kind of weeded itself out actually as we went down the line. And then as we got further down the thread, I felt like it really didn't have anything to do with the other people at that point. It was more questions directly for me from this other person. And I decided not to copy everybody on it. Then I just made it between me and that person. And it was much easier and quicker once we did that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like too, if you have a lot of questions going back and forth with a variety of people, that kind of sounds like it's not a good situation for email, but a good situation for a meeting that has the clear guidelines like you talked about earlier.
Or pick up the phone, depending on where they are. Sometimes that's a lot quicker. If you start going back and forth a lot with email, to me, it's just pick up the phone.
Yeah.
And do it very directly and very quickly, rather than spend all that time writing things. And in fact, there have been situations I've seen where one person has written a couple of questions that would take probably 30 minutes to write an answer to, literally, because the questions were complex. But with a phone call, it could be handled in 5 minutes. So when you see those types of questions coming your way, that's a better way to handle it. It will save you a lot of time, and it will make things easier for the other person to understand too. Then if they need some kind of clarification, you can always send something with bullet points clarifying the main points.
Yeah, and if you can't take the time to give them a long response back, there's also nothing wrong with saying, I appreciate your thoughtful email. I only have a few minutes and just wanted to quickly respond. Yes. Sometimes that's a great way to get out of having to write a reciprocal, 5-mile long email. So maybe that's a good way to kind of navigate it, because if you're a short and to the point kind of person where you answer everything in there, but it's not in long, detailed conversation mode, maybe that's the way to do that respectfully. Okay, we have a question about the hybrid meeting. Okay. If we have a team with 1/3 of the team being remote, how do we conduct the meeting? We don't want to have 2 separate meetings for the same topic, one for people on site and one for remote. How to best conduct that kind of meeting and keep the engagement from everyone? Thank you. That's from On.
Yeah, that's like I said, that's very difficult to do, and I see more companies going to this. It's, in my experience with the companies I've worked with and trained, it's always produced better results when you do it separately. Although I do understand in your situation what you're saying. I believe you said you only had 3 remotes. It's not like it's split 50-50.
No, 1/3 of the team. So a big chunk of the team. Okay,
so that's still a pretty big chunk. Yeah, I would still split it up. It may seem like it takes more time, but the outcome in terms of wasted time results, because people don't understand, or people, start drifting away where they're not engaged, they're not paying attention, and then they're confused, they're not sure what they're supposed to be doing. It's just so much easier if you can specifically do a virtual meeting with the virtual people, addressing their needs. And that, again, is a different topic. I've done full day trainings on addressing, virtual team meetings. So that's a big chunk in itself, like what the differences are between that and face-to-face. But it can make things go so much more smoothly, so much more quickly if you do that.
Mm-hmm.
And in my experience with the companies I've worked with, trying to combine that is just not very effective.
Yeah, Carol has a good response, and it's kind of my same question here is, couldn't you just all do it virtually? I mean, if you're all in a virtual meeting room, like Zoom, we're on Zoom today, and Zoom has their virtual meeting rooms where you can have people all over, lots of access, and still see faces, but it's a level playing field. Would that be a potential solution?
Well, that's better, but honestly, the companies I've worked with, they weren't using Zoom, they were using WebEx. It was the same thing. It was just complicated when you've got two different sets of people with two different sets of needs. They even talked about making all of the meetings virtual where everybody was in their own offices, but that didn't make any sense, because it's better if people are face to face, to bring them together face to face where they can interact easily and converse and discuss points and that type of thing. So again, it's just better if you can separate those two things.
And if the bottom line is, if you have to navigate a part of your team being remote and the other being local, it goes all the way back to what you were talking about, having very clear guidelines and have the code of conduct and have clear expectations and having an agenda, and maybe even giving people designated time slots where they're the ones communicating, so they know, hey, Lisa, you're up in 5 minutes, so be prepared to cover your part of the meeting. So that's important. Let's see, we've got another question here. How do we record PDUs for this session, and what category? This session doesn't have PDUs from Dr. Malone, but if you need for us to send something, proof of attendance, we would be happy to do that for you. You just email us, and then you can work with your team to figure out how best to get credit for this through that organization.
I do want to say something about this. The topics, like the topic I've done today, all the topics I've worked with a lot of project managers, I've worked with a lot of HR directors, and whether I've been speaking or whatever, they've always been able to get the PDUs or the CEUs, depending on what the field is. It's never been a problem. I personally don't know how to go about it. I'm glad that Lisa will be able to get the information for you, but you should be able to. I'm just not the one who actually takes care of it, and neither is Lisa, but we can help you figure that out.
Yeah, just send us an email so we have record of that. Hey, Dr. Malone, send us an email so that we can get the facts, just what you said. Excellent. Very, very good. Okay. Any other questions before we get ready to sign off? Thank you so much, everybody, for your participation today. It's really, it just makes a program so much better when people have such great feedback like you did. So,
yeah, thank you very much. This has been great. And I look forward to hearing from you. Like I said, please email me. We'll set up those complimentary consultations, the strategy sessions, or if you want to talk about speaking or training, I would love to help you out with that.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much for being on the program today. You will get the recorded copy of this in your email either tomorrow or definitely by Monday. And again, email Dr. Malone if you have any questions, and definitely if she can help your team communicate more effectively. Thanks for being on the program today.
Thank you.
Yep.